All right. I want everyone listening to just kind of pause for a second. Stop whatever you're doing. Put the phone down, maybe pause the treadmill. Just give me your brain for a minute.
Yeah, just tune in fully for this.
Exactly. I want you to picture a scenario. It is the absolute definition of a perfect day. We're talking, maybe a Saturday in mid-July. The sky is that aggressive kind of blue, not a single cloud in sight.
The kind of weather where everyone is just in a good mood.
Right. And you are sitting at a sidewalk cafe. Maybe you've got an iced coffee or a nice glass of wine. You're with your best friends.
That's ideal.
It is. There's no work email pinging your phone. There are no debt collectors calling you. No family drama. Just peace.
The kind of day you look forward to all week long. The kind of day where you genuinely think, okay, life is actually good.
The vibe is immaculate. And then, snap.
Out of absolutely nowhere.
No warning. There's no tiger jumping out of the bushes. There's no guy in a ski mask running at you. Just a shift, a glitch.
A certain massive physiological glitch that changes everything in a split second.
It starts with the heat. That's how the research we're looking at today describes it, and it really stuck with me. A wave of heat, like someone opened an industrial oven door right in your face.
But the heat is coming from inside.
Yes, from inside your chest, it washes over you. And then instantly the sweat goes cold, it gets prickly.
Your extremities start acting up.
Your hands, yeah, they aren't yours anymore. They're totally numb. Pins and needles, like you slept on them for 3 days straight. And then the drum solo starts in your chest.
The palpitations. And we're not talking about the good kind of butterflies, like when you see your crush.
No, this is violent. It's hard. It feels like the heart is literally trying to punch its way through your rib cage to get out. The world tilts on its axis. The cafe table you're sitting at suddenly looks like it's miles away.
Or looks two-dimensional, like a photograph.
Right. The depth perception just goes. And your brain, which was totally happy 5 seconds ago, locks onto one singular terrifying certainty.
I am dying.
Exactly. I am dying. This is a heart attack. This is a stroke. I am collapsing right here on the sidewalk in front of everyone.
It is arguably the single most visceral false alarm a human being can ever experience.
And what we are describing here so vividly is the textbook onset of a panic attack.
But more specifically, it's the disconnect that makes it so traumatizing for people.
What do you mean by the disconnect?
Well, think about it. If a tiger was actually chasing you, or if you were dangling off the edge of a cliff, that physical reaction would make complete sense.
It would be appropriate for the situation.
Exactly. It would be appropriate. Your body is doing what it's supposed to do to keep you alive. But when you are just sitting there, sipping a latte, the disconnect between your safe environment and your body's extreme reaction feels like literal insanity.
It feels like a betrayal. That is the word that kept coming up in the source materials we are diving into today. A deep betrayal by your own body.
Because you trust your body.
You do. You trust your body to keep you alive, not to suddenly convince you that you're dying when you're perfectly safe.
That's a really powerful way to frame it. And that betrayal creates a deep, lasting psychological scar.
So, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are not just talking about stress. We aren't talking about being a little worried about your taxes or, having the Sunday scaries before the work week.
We are talking about a full system nervous system collapse.
We've compiled a massive stack of sources today. We're looking at clinical research, detailed patient logs, and some really heavy neurobiology papers. And they all chronicle this journey from that first terrifying cafe moment to a complete rewiring of the brain.
And I really want to emphasize that word, rewiring, because the mission for our discussion today isn't just to teach you how to calm down.
Or how to breathe into a paper bag.
Right. The sources we have are incredibly ambitious. They argue that you can actually reprogram the biological mechanism that pulls that fire alarm in the first place.
Which is huge. Because I think most people dealing with this just assume, well, this is my life now. I am the person who freaks out at restaurants. I am a broken person.
They think it's a permanent personality trait. They manage it. They cope. They carry medication in their pocket just in case. But the research today is arguing for repair.
Actual repair, not just symptom management.
Yes. Healing the system at the root.
Before we get to the repair part, though, we have to talk about what the sources call the medical merry-go-round. Because this was the part of the research that I found the most frustrating to read.
It's infuriating.
I was getting genuinely angry just reading the patient notes. It just felt so unfair.
It is a nearly universal experience for panic sufferers, unfortunately. It's almost a dark rite of passage.
So let's go back to that cafe. You think you're dying. What do? You go to the ER, obviously. You're a rational person. You think your heart is exploding. You call an ambulance or you rush to the hospital.
You absolutely have to. The physical symptoms of a severe panic attack and a massive heart attack are undeniably similar.
Chest pain, numbness in the left arm, shortness of breath.
You'd be foolish not to get it checked out.
So you rush in, they hook you up to the EKG, they stick you with needles, draw the blood, they check the troponin levels to see if the heart muscle is damaged.
And you are laying there on that gurney, shaking, entirely convinced that this is the end of your life.
And the doctor comes back into the room. He looks at his clipboard, he looks down at you, and he says, "What?
I'm fine.
You're fine. Clean bill of health." He says, "Maybe you're just stressed. Go home and get some rest. Maybe cut back on the caffeine a little bit."
And that precise moment is where the real trauma of the disorder begins.
Why is that? Explain that mechanism to me. Because logically, if I went to the doctor terrified I had a brain tumor and the doctor said no tumor, I would be thrilled. I'd be celebrating in the parking lot. Why is hearing you're fine so devastating for someone having a panic attack?
Because your lived reality is being denied by an authority figure.
Wow.
You are sitting there on that hospital bed. Maybe you're still incredibly dizzy. Maybe you still feel like you physically cannot take a full breath of air. Your heart is still skipping beats. And the person with the medical degree is telling you that your experience isn't physically real.
It creates this massive gap between your sensory experience and the clinical diagnosis.
Exactly. You start to think, okay, if it's not my heart, if the expensive machine says my heart is healthy, then I must literally be losing my mind.
It's gaslighting. It's unintentional medical gaslighting.
Unintentional is the key word there, but yes, the effect is the same. The doctor looks at the data and sees a healthy, pumping heart. The patient feels a dying, failing heart. Both are true in very different ways, but the patient leaves feeling completely isolated and crazy.
And the sources describe the cycle in brutal detail. It is never just one ER visit.
Oh, never.
It's the ER on Saturday. Then it's the specialist cardiologist next week. Then they put that Holter monitor strapped to your chest for 48 hours to track every single beat.
Then you do a treadmill stress test.
Then the tilt table test. Then an MRI of the brain because now you're convinced you have a tumor that's causing the dizziness. Then you're at the inner ear specialist.
And every single time, without fail, the doctors say the hardware looks good.
The hardware. That brings us to the core distinction we need to establish right now. The difference between hardware and software. This is the analogy from the research that really unlocked this whole incredibly complex topic for me.
It is the absolute best way to conceptualize it.
Break that down for me. Because if the hardware is the physical heart and the physical lungs, what is the software?
The software is the electrical signaling system. It is your autonomic nervous system. So think of it exactly like a computer. You can go to the store and buy a brand new, top-of-the-line laptop. The glass screen is perfect. The keyboard is satisfyingly clicky. The internal processor is intact.
Physically, it is a perfect, flawless machine.
Right. But if I install a malicious virus on that laptop that makes the screen flash bright blue every 10 seconds,
then the computer is unusable. It's basically garbage.
it's completely unusable. But if you take that glitching laptop to a physical hardware repair guy and he just checks the motherboard and the glass screen, he's going to tell you the screen is fine, the glass isn't broken.
Because he's looking for a physical crack.
Exactly. He's looking for structural damage. He is not looking at the code. He's not evaluating the operating system.
Okay, so in this analogy, the panic attack is the software glitching out. The screen is flashing blue. And the doctors at the ER are the hardware repair guys saying, hey, no cracks found here.
Precisely. The standard medical tests we run in hospitals, MRIs, EKGs, CT scans, they are largely designed to look for structural damage. They look for physical tumors, clogged arteries, broken bones. They're not very good at looking for functional disorders.
Functional meaning the structure is perfectly fine, but the signal moving through it is chaotic.
Yes. The wiring is intact, but the electricity running through it is surging unpredictably.
And the source material highlights one specific symptom that is the ultimate sign of the software crash. And it actually isn't even the racing heart, it's the dizziness.
The relentless 24/7 dizziness.
This part honestly terrified me when I was reading it. The source talks about subjects who weren't just having isolated panic attacks. They were dizzy all the time, not just during the acute panic phase.
We're talking about severe vertigo, a rocking kind of dizziness. They compare it to mal de débarquement syndrome, which is that swaying feeling you get right after you step off a boat.
Yeah, one patient described it as literally living on a boat, like he was walking on a soft mattress constantly. Even when he was just laying completely still in his bed, he felt like he was falling or sinking through the floor. How in the world does anxiety cause that?
It seems disconnected, doesn't it?
Totally. I get the racing heart. Adrenaline drops into the bloodstream, the heart beats faster. That's simple chemistry. But why is the sense of balance destroyed?
This is where we have to get a little technical about the vagus nerve and the vestibular system. Your sense of physical balance isn't just located in the fluid in your inner ears. It is a massive, highly complex calculation that your brain makes every single millisecond.
It's constantly doing math in the background.
Exactly. It takes input from three main sources: your vision, your inner ear fluid, and your proprioception.
Proprioception, that's the sensors in your muscles, right?
Right, the sensor's telling your brain exactly where your limbs are in physical space.
Okay, so it's a triad of data feeds coming in constantly.
Yes, and when the nervous system is in a state of collapse, which is what happens after prolonged chronic stress or a series of severe panic attacks, the brain becomes hypervigilant. It goes into overdrive.
It's overprocessing data.
Exactly. It is checking for mortal threats every single microsecond. And this intense overclocking of the brain's processor actually creates a tiny lag in the processing of physical movement.
Wait, an actual lag, like a bad internet connection on a video call.
It is exactly like that.
Yeah.
Imagine you turn your head sharply to the left. Your eyes see the room move, but your brain takes just 1 microsecond too long to process that the horizon is shifted based on the ear fluid and the muscle movement.
And that mismatch between the senses.
That tiny delay between reality and your brain's perception of reality, that feels like dizziness. That feels like floating. That is what makes the solid floor feel spongy to a highly anxious person.
That is wild. So the dizziness is literally the human brain buffering under too much load.
In a very real way, yes. It is a system overload. And the source emphasizes heavily that this constant dizziness is often what actually drives people to the brink of despair.
I can see why.
Because you can grit your teeth and handle a 10-minute panic attack.
Yeah.
It is awful, it sucks, but it eventually ends. But feeling like you are going to fall over every single minute of every single day, that breaks your spirit. That is what makes people become completely housebound.
And that leads directly to the collapse. The source literally calls it nervous system collapse. It sounds a bit dramatic at first, but when you understand the mechanics, it feels entirely accurate. It's the moment when the body just says, I quit. I physically cannot do this anymore.
It is burnout on a cellular level. The battery is completely dead.
So we've firmly established the sensation. We know it feels like imminent death. We know the doctors usually can't find it because they're looking at the hardware, not the software. So now we have to ask the big question.
The question everyone listening wants answered.
Right. The question every single person who has ever felt this is probably screaming at their phone right now. Why is this happening?
Why me and why now?
Exactly. Why me, why now, and why on a beautiful sunny Saturday at brunch? Because that is the cruelest part of the whole disorder. If I was deployed in a war zone, I would get it. I would understand the panic, but I'm literally eating a croissant.
To understand that paradox, we have to look closely at that alien sensation you mentioned earlier, that hot and cold flush that washes over the body. We really need to decode the chemistry of that exact moment to understand the mechanics of the false alarm.
Let's do it, because the source describes it as burning up and freezing at the exact same time, which, to a layperson, sounds physically impossible.
It feels impossible to the person experiencing it, but from an evolutionary standpoint, it is highly functional. That specific sensation is the unmistakable signature of a massive adrenaline and cortisol dump into the bloodstream.
We're talking about a flood of stress hormones.
A tidal wave. When the primitive brain perceives a threat, even a completely fake one, it immediately orders the adrenal glands to empty the tank.
Empty the tank. That's a lot of juice to drop into the system all at once.
It is, and it has a very specific life-saving physiological purpose. Remember the heat wave we talked about?
Yeah, the oven door opening in your chest.
That heat is literally the blood rushing away from your center and flooding into your major muscle groups, your quads, your biceps, your shoulders. The body is rapidly prepping you to physically fight a bear or sprint a marathon to escape danger. It is heating up the engine.
Okay, so that explains the sudden heat. What about the cold sweat? Why the ice water feeling right after?
The cold feeling is the blood violently draining away from the non-essential systems, your skin surface, your fingers, your toes, your digestive system.
Because digestion isn't important if you're about to be eaten.
Exactly. The body essentially says, we don't need to digest that croissant right now, and we definitely don't need sensitive fingertips to play the piano. We need raw power. So the warm blood leaves the surface of the skin, causing the chills, the sudden shivers, the intense numbness in the hands, and rushes deep to the core and the major muscles.
So you are biologically primed for mortal combat, but you are just sitting at a brunch spot holding a mimosa.
And all of that massive explosive energy has absolutely nowhere to go. You aren't fighting a bear, you aren't running for your life. So that energy just vibrates. It aggressively shakes the entire nervous system.
And the brain, what is the brain doing during this? The amygdala.
The amygdala is the prime culprit here. It is the primitive survival center of the brain, the lizard brain. And we have to remember one crucial fact about the amygdala. It doesn't have eyes.
Wait, explain that.
The amygdala doesn't see the sunny day outside. It doesn't see your friends laughing at the table. It only receives chemical signals from the body. It feels the massive adrenaline spike and it goes, whoa, we have a huge amount of run juice flooding the system. Therefore, there must be a massive threat nearby.
Oh, wow. So it works backward.
Yes. This is the logic error that the source materials talk about so extensively. Usually, the sequence makes sense. You see a real threat. You get scared. Your brain releases adrenaline.
Cause and effect.
Right. But in a panic attack, the sequence is inverted. Adrenaline spikes first, maybe from too much caffeine, maybe from a lack of sleep, maybe from an intrusive thought. The brain feels that adrenaline and assumes there must be a life-threatening reason for it.
But since it can't find a bear out in the real world...
It turns its gaze inward. The brain says, if the threat isn't outside in the cafe, it must be inside my own body. My heart is exploding. My brain is bleeding. I am actively dying. It is literally the only logical conclusion the primitive lizard brain can make to explain the intense physical sensations it's receiving.
That is just terrifyingly stupid of our brains. Like, thanks a lot, evolution.
It's a survival mechanism that's just a little too trigger-happy. Evolutionarily speaking, it would much rather be safe than sorry. It would rather falsely assume you were having a heart attack than accidentally miss a real tiger hiding in the grass. It prioritizes keeping you alive over keeping you comfortable.
Okay, so that explains the physical mechanism of the moment itself. But the source material goes much deeper than that. It asks the harder question. Where is the underlying pressure coming from?
Right.
If I am genuinely not stressed about my job, and I am having a great time with my friends, why is my adrenal tank leaking in the first place? And this is where we dive into the filing cabinet concept.
The neuroscience of stuck trauma. This is honestly the true heart of today's deep dive. This is where we transition from understanding what is happening to understanding why it is happening.
The source uses this incredible analogy of a filing cabinet to explain the function of the hippocampus. I found this to be one of the most helpful visuals in the entire text.
It's brilliant. Makes a highly complex neurological process very easy to grasp. So you have your limbic system. That's your guard dog, your alarm bell, your raw emotion. And right next to it, you have the hippocampus.
And the hippocampus is the archivist.
Exactly. It's the brain's librarian. Its biological job is to take your short-term, everyday experiences like, I just ate lunch, or I just walked the dog, and process them. It stamps them with a clear time and date, and it files them securely away into the long-term memory cabinet.
Okay, so in a healthy brain, normally you have an experience, the hippocampus processes it, drops it in a folder, files it away, and it officially becomes a past memory. It has a timestamp that says, that happened yesterday, it is over now.
Correct. When you recall that memory a year later, your body knows it is safely in the past. But here is the critical glitch that leads to panic. The source argues that when a trauma occurs, particularly in childhood, and especially if it involves intense, overwhelming fear, the emotion is so massive that the hippocampus basically goes offline. It freezes up.
It's like a computer crashing when you try to open a video file that is just way too big for the processor.
That's exactly it. The emotional file is simply too heavy for the system to handle in that moment. The poor librarian panics and literally drops the file. So that terrifying memory never gets properly sorted into the long-term cabinet. It gets stuck permanently in the short-term processing center.
It's just left sitting on the desk.
It is left wide open on the desk,
Yeah.
and because it is still sitting in the short-term memory tray, it never receives that crucial past timestamp. It stays present. It stays raw and fresh.
So 10, 20, or even 30 years later, something seemingly random triggers that open file. Maybe it's a specific smell, a certain tone of voice, or even just a high level of general background stress.
And when that happens, the brain doesn't look at it and say, oh, that was the scariest thing that happened to me when I was 5 years old. It says, this is happening to me right now, today.
That is the time capsule concept the source talks about. The body doesn't just remember the trauma, It biologically relives the trauma as a current active threat. That perfectly explains the sheer intensity of a panic attack. You aren't just remembering fear, you are re-experiencing the original terror in real time.
Precisely. You are physiologically time traveling.
And the source specifically highlights two critical developmental windows where this is most likely to happen: ages 0 to 6 and ages 8 to 12.
Neurologists often call these the wet cement years. The developing brain is highly plastic, and the filing system itself is still actively being constructed. If a child experiences abandonment, abuse, or even just a period of intense instability, maybe their parents are fighting constantly, maybe there's an alcoholic parent in the home, and the child doesn't have the emotional tools to process that terror, it gets trapped.
I think this directly answers the question that I know so many listeners probably have right now, which is, why now? My childhood was 25 years ago. I've been to therapy. I've moved on. I have a great job, a nice house, a good life. Why am I suddenly having a massive panic attack in a grocery store when I am 35 years old?
Right, it feels completely unfair.
The source calls this delayed reaction the accumulation theory.
Yes. We have to remember that emotions are actual energy. This isn't just, woo-woo spiritual poetry. It is literal biological physics. Energy cannot be destroyed. It can only be transformed or stored. If you trap that intense emotional energy, that childhood fear or rage inside the nervous system, it doesn't just quietly evaporate over time.
It accumulates. It builds up pressure against the walls of the container.
It is exactly like a pressure cooker on a stove. The heat is always on low, steadily building pressure for decades. And this leads us to a vital distinction the source makes between anxiety and panic, which I think is incredibly helpful for people to understand.
Yeah, let's definitely clarify that. Because in everyday conversation, people use those terms interchangeably all the time. They say, I'm having anxiety or I'm panicking to mean the same thing.
Yeah.
But the source makes it clear that they are mechanically very different stages of the same process.
The source suggests that anxiety is the build-up phase. It is the simmering water. It is the high-pitched whistling of the tea kettle. It is that low-level, constant, exhausting hum of something is wrong that sits in the back of your mind all day. That is the internal pressure building against the lid of the cooker.
And then panic.
Panic is the explosion. Panic is the structural integrity failing, and the lid violently blowing off the pressure cooker.
So in a really weird, twisted way, the panic attack is actually the body's attempt to help you.
It is the body's desperate, last-ditch attempt to release the trapped, accumulating energy. The nervous system simply cannot hold the immense pressure down anymore, so it forcefully vents it all at once in a chaotic, terrifying explosion. The source actually frames the panic attack as a messenger. It is the physical body screaming at you, I cannot keep holding this down. You need to look at this trauma. I am venting this dangerous steam right now before the entire pot melts down.
That is a deeply terrifying messenger. I mean,
Yeah.
Nobody wants that specific messenger kicking down their door at 3 in the morning. But conceptually, it makes perfect sense. If you consistently ignore the quiet whisper of chronic anxiety, you eventually get the deafening scream of a panic attack.
And that, right there, is exactly why the medical merry-go-round constantly fails these patients. You cannot permanently fix a trapped, energetic emotional memory with a daily beta blocker.
You can numb it, maybe, but you can't fix it.
Right. You cannot resolve a spiritual or deep emotional blockage with a blood pressure pill. The hardware is fine. You have to actively address the traumatic energy that is stuck in the software of the limbic system.
Okay, so we fully understand the mechanism now. We have a glitch in the brain's filing cabinet, a decades-long buildup of emotional pressure, and then the sudden, violent explosion. We clearly know the why. So now we have to pivot and talk about the what now.
The practical application.
Exactly. The source provides what they call an emergency toolkit. And I want to start by looking at the most aggressive technique they mention. Because I'll be honest, when I first read this section, I was pretty skeptical.
You're referring to the command technique.
The command, yes.
Yeah.
Technique number 1, the go-away command. The source recounts this highly specific moment in their own journey. They're 24 years old, they have been suffering relentlessly for a long time, and they finally just reached an absolute breaking point.
A moment of total exhaustion.
Right. They are sitting there, they feel the familiar, terrifying wave of panic starting to wash over them, and instead of shrinking down, instead of curling up in a ball on the floor like they normally do, they get angry.
They push back.
They yell either intensely internally or out loud, "Go! You do not belong to me. You cannot control me."
It sounds almost too simple on the surface, doesn't it? Just yelling at the anxiety to leave. It feels a bit like live, laugh, love, but aggressive.
It totally does. It feels like someone just saying, well, just stop being sad. But the source absolutely insists this specific moment was a massive turning point in their recovery. Why does that work?
There is a very deep, well-documented psychological mechanism at work here. In clinical terms, it is called disidentification.
Disidentification.
Yes. When you are in the middle of a severe panic attack, usually you completely merge with the panic. You become the fear. Your internal monologue says, I am dying, I am terrified, I am broken.
You fully embody the feeling. There's absolutely no separation between the concept of me and the feeling of fear.
Correct. You are swallowed whole by it. But by forcefully shouting, you do not belong to me, you're intentionally creating a duality. You are actively forcing a mental separation between the self, the conscious observer, the landlord of the body, and the mind, or the symptom, which is suddenly repositioned as just a squatter.
You are firmly establishing that you are the rightful landlord, and the anxiety is just an unwanted intruder in your house. You are asserting your authority over your own nervous system. You're basically saying, I am the captain now.
Exactly. It breaks the debilitating paralysis. Panic absolutely thrives on your feeling of helplessness. The moment you get genuinely angry, the moment you aggressively assert dominance over the sensation, you actually shift your body's hormonal profile.
Really? Anger changes the chemistry.
Yes, righteous anger requires testosterone and noradrenaline to physically manifest. Those are chemically very different from the pure, paralyzing cortisol flood of helpless terror. By getting mad, you are biologically shifting your stance from victim to fighter.
That is fascinating. Using anger as a direct biological antidote to terror.
It can be highly effective. It is all about reclaiming your agency. You are ripping your hands back onto the steering wheel.
The source even describes vividly visualizing a thick black smoke physically leaving their body when they shouted the command, like actually seeing the fear get evicted.
Visualization is an incredibly powerful tool for the brain. It takes an abstract, overwhelming feeling and gives it a concrete form, making it something you can mentally and physically expel.
But the source does add a really important nuance here, which I appreciate because it keeps things realistic. They say this command technique works best when you still have a little bit of mental strength left.
Right?
If you are already in a full-blown 10 out of 10 curled on the bathroom floor collapse, you might not have the cognitive bandwidth to clearly yell at it.
That is very true. When the conscious cognitive part of your brain is completely taken offline by the sheer volume of adrenaline, when you literally cannot form words to speak, you need something much more basic and sensory. You have to hack the nervous system from the outside in. And that brings us perfectly to the second technique in the toolkit.
The 5-4-3-2-1 grounding method. Now, I know I've heard of this before. It is a bit of a classic in anxiety circles, but I want us to actually walk through it step by step. Because casually reading about it on a blog is one thing, but understanding how to physically do it in the heat of the moment is another.
Let's absolutely do it. This is widely considered the gold standard intervention for acute dissociation. When you are deeply panicking, your focus is entirely internal. You are obsessively monitoring your heartbeat, the depth of your breathing, the spinning of your thoughts. You have effectively left reality. You are not mentally in the room anymore.
You're trapped inside your own head.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This specific technique forcefully commands the brain to switch its data inputs.
Okay, so step 1, find 5 things you can see, and the source specifically says you should name them out loud. Why is speaking out loud so important?
Physically naming the objects engages the Broca's area of the brain, which is the primary language processing center. During a severe traumatic trigger, the language center often shuts down completely. That is why people frequently stutter or literally cannot speak during deep shock. By forcing yourself to articulate words out loud, you are manually forcing that highly evolved part of the brain to reboot and come back online.
Okay, so doing it right now in this room, I see the silver microphone stand. I see the red recording light blinking. I see the gray acoustic foam glued to the wall. I see your glasses on your face. And I see my white coffee cup.
Perfect. By doing that, you are actively forcing your visual cortex to process external neutral data instead of letting it loop on internal catastrophic data.
Step 2, 4 things you can touch.
This is about raw physical sensation. Don't just visually look at the wall. Physically reach out and touch it. What is the texture? Is it cold? Is it rough?
Okay, I am touching the wooden desk right now. It's smooth. It feels kind of cold. I'm touching my jeans. It's rough denim. I can feel the tight pressure of the headphones pressing against my ears. And I can feel the solid weight of my feet resting flat on the carpet.
Notice what you're doing. You are intentionally dragging your conscious awareness all the way out into your nerve endings, into your fingertips and toes. pulling it far away from your racing heart.
Step 3, 3 things you can hear.
This step usually requires you to listen actively past the loud rushing sound of your own blood pumping in your ears. You have to strain a little bit to find the external noises.
Okay, I hear the low hum of the air conditioning vent above us. I hear a car driving by outside on the street. It's very faint. And I hear the sound of my own voice echoing slightly in the headphones.
Step 4 is next. 2 things you can smell. This one can actually be surprisingly tricky when you're panicked.
Yeah, usually when I'm panicked, I just smell my own fear sweat.
Well, try to actively hunt for a different scent in the environment.
Okay, I can still smell the roasted coffee in my mug. And oh, I smell that faint chemical smell of the hand sanitizer I used before we started recording.
That's great. The olfactory sense, the sense of smell, is actually directly hardwired into the limbic system where the panic originates. Introducing a strong neutral scent is a very powerful direct circuit interrupt.
And finally, step 5. One thing you can taste.
Just notice whatever is currently on your palate, the lingering mint from your toothpaste, the bitter coffee, or even just the neutral metallic taste of your own mouth.
The source explains that the primary result of doing this full sequence isn't just simple distraction, it is actually about managing cognitive bandwidth.
Exactly. It is a biological cognitive load hack. Your brain physically has a limited amount of processing bandwidth at any given moment. It mathematically cannot sustain the intense, all-consuming narrative of, I am dying right now, while it is simultaneously being forced to catalog red light, cold wood desk, faint car tire sounds, coffee smell.
It's like a computer trying to run 2 massive programs at once.
Right. It's like trying to watch 2 completely different movies on the same screen. The internal panic movie physically has to pause so the external sensory movie can render and play. It forcibly disrupts the catastrophic loop.
So that is the emergency toolkit. That is the glass-breaking fire extinguisher for when the alarms are already blaring. But obviously, we don't want to just carry a heavy fire extinguisher around with us everywhere we go for the rest of our lives. We want to stop the fires from spontaneously starting in the first place.
Prevention is the ultimate goal.
Exactly. So let's transition to segment 4, the maintenance toolkit. This is the daily preventative care.
This is where the actual long-term rewiring of the nervous system happens.
The source is extremely adamant about one specific daily practice, breath work, and specifically a pattern called the 4-4-8 breath. Now, I know what people are thinking because I thought it too. Telling someone with severe panic disorder to just take a deep breath is widely considered the single most annoying, patronizing advice you can possibly give.
It is incredibly frustrating, mostly because people usually do it completely wrong when they're panicked. They take a huge, sharp, deep breath high up into their chest, which functionally just acts like another hit of adrenaline. It actually increases the anxiety.
So how do we do it right? What is the actual protocol here?
The required pattern is very precise. You inhale slowly through the nose for a count of 4 seconds. You hold that breath gently for 4 seconds, and then you exhale very slowly through the nose for 8 full seconds.
Why is the exhale so dramatically long? Why 8 seconds? Why not just breathe in for 4 and out for 4 like normal?
Because 8 is the biological magic number. This isn't just a relaxing idea. It is pure, hardwired human biology. When you inhale, you slightly activate your sympathetic nervous system, which is your alertness mechanism. Your heart rate actually naturally speeds up just a tiny bit on every inhale.
Okay, I'm following.
But when you exhale, you heavily activate the parasympathetic nervous system. That is the rest and digest mode. Your heart rate physically slows down on the exhale.
Oh, I see.
By mathematically forcing the exhale to be exactly double the length of the inhale, you are biologically forcing the body to downregulate its systems. You are physically hacking the vagus nerve. You are sending an unavoidable chemical signal to the brain that loudly says, we are completely safe.
Because logically, you couldn't breathe like that if you were in danger.
Exactly. Think about it from the brain's perspective. You physically cannot exhale slowly and smoothly for 8 long seconds if you are actively sprinting away from a predator. Your lungs wouldn't allow it.
So the primitive brain receives that slow breathing data and thinks, well, if the lungs are operating this slowly and calmly, there logically cannot be a threat nearby. We can turn the alarms off.
You've got it. You are reverse engineering a state of safety. You are essentially tricking the highly vigilant lizard brain into a state of profound calmness.
Now, the source adds a really honest human detail to this protocol that I absolutely love. They call it the 10-minute rule. And they explicitly warn you that the first 5 minutes of doing this breathing are incredibly annoying.
I love that they included that honesty. It is so universally true.
Yeah, they write that the brain actively fights the process. You're sitting there trying to count your breaths, and your internal monologue is just screaming, "This is so boring. I have a massive to-do list. I have 40 unread emails. Why are we just sitting here wasting time doing this? This isn't working at all. I am still feeling anxious."
What you are experiencing there is the fierce resistance of a chemically addicted mind. A traumatized nervous system is quite literally addicted to the high beta, cortisol-drenched stress state. It wrongly interprets constant stress as necessary productivity. Slowing down genuinely feels dangerous to a brain that is used to always being on guard.
So it fights back to keep you safe?
Exactly. So that first 5 solid minutes of breathing is essentially a chemical detox period. You have to grit your teeth and consciously push through that initial extreme annoyance. The Force clearly notes that genuine, deep physical relaxation rarely sets in until after you cross that 5-minute threshold.
So the goal is to aim for 10 to 15 minutes total every session. And they suggest using long meditative music tracks as a timer so you aren't obsessively opening your eyes to check the clock on your phone every 30 seconds.
That's a great tip. And the key here is absolute consistency over sheer intensity. You need to do this every single morning when you wake up and every single night before you sleep. You are literally engaging in resistance training for your nervous system.
Like lifting weights.
Precisely like going to the gym. You don't just go to the gym once on the day you need to lift a heavy couch. You go every day to slowly build the baseline muscle so that when the heavy lifting is required, you are already strong enough to handle it. By doing the 4-4-8 breath daily, you are fundamentally raising the threshold for what it takes to trigger a panic attack in your body.
Okay, so we are proactively breathing to build the parasympathetic muscle, and we are grounding to stop acute attacks. But the Source takes the recovery process a massive step deeper than just mechanics. We have to talk about clearing out the garbage stored deep in the subconscious mind.
This is where the work gets really profound.
This is where we transition from managing the physiology to healing the deep psychology.
It's what many therapists refer to as shadow work.
The Source brings up the concept of daily affirmations. You know the drill, standing in front of the bathroom mirror, looking yourself in the eyes, and repeating phrases like, "I am safe, I am fundamentally a good person, I am calm and centered."
Right.
And the Source is very blunt. They admit that for years they absolutely hated affirmations. They felt like they were just telling themselves ridiculous lies.
And for a vast majority of people with complex trauma, those affirmations literally are lies. If your subconscious mind, that deep filing cabinet we discussed, is completely stuffed with decades of unprocessed evidence that screams, "I am constantly unsafe, I am broken, I have an imminent danger," and you stand in front of a mirror casually saying, "I am totally safe,"
The subconscious mind just aggressively rejects the new information.
it flat out laughs at you. It says, "I have 20 years of data proving you are not safe. Nice try."
The Source uses a really vivid image here. They say, you cannot plant beautiful flowers in a toxic dump without clearing out the heavy debris first.
It's a perfect metaphor.
So how on earth do we actually clear that debris out of the nervous system? The Source offers a specific technique that is, honestly, it's pretty intense. It is formally called the darkroom technique.
It is a heavy, advanced technique, but it is explicitly designed for moving incredibly heavy emotional loads. It is built specifically for dealing with those deep, unshared, toxic secrets. Deep shame, profound regret, and above all else, deeply repressed rage.
We absolutely have to talk about the rage component because in my experience, and the Source notes this too, people who suffer from severe panic attacks are very often the nice people.
Well, almost always.
They are the chronic people pleasers. They are the helpers, the peacemakers. They almost never allow themselves to visibly get angry.
And that coping mechanism is exactly the core of the problem. They obsessively swallow their natural anger in order to keep the peace around them. But, as we discussed for the accumulation theory, that intense, energetic anger doesn't just quietly fade away. It turns completely inward and viciously attacks the host body. In many clinical cases, a panic attack is literally just intensely internalized rage trying to escape.
Wow. So the darkroom method is designed to address that. The protocol is go into a completely pitch black room, a closet, a basement, wherever. Or if you absolutely can't find a dark physical space, forcefully visualize one in your mind's eye. But total sensory darkness is key. And then You just purge.
You purge completely. You scream, you curse, you yell at the top of your lungs, you say out loud all the horrible, ugly things you have never dared to even whisper in the light of day.
The terrifying thoughts that make you feel like you're a quote-unquote bad person.
Exactly. You scream, I absolutely hate my mother for what she did to me, or I bitterly resent my children right now, or I am so unspeakably furious at my partner.
The source strongly emphasizes the raw physicality required for this. It can't just be mental. You have to physically beat a pillow with your fists. You grab a stick or a rolled-up magazine, and you violently hit a couch cushion over and over. You have to force that trapped kinetic energy physically out of your muscle tissue.
It is an intentionally primal act. It has to be. Remember, the core definition of trauma is stuck biological energy. You mathematically cannot think your way out of stuck physical energy. You cannot use cold logic to resolve boiling decades-old rage. You have to physically move it through the body.
You have to complete the cycle.
Exactly. You have to complete the biological stress cycle. If you watch a wild animal closely after it survives a terrifying predator attack, it will stand there and violently shake its entire body for a few minutes.
To discharge the excess adrenaline.
Right. But humans, because of social conditioning, we almost always freeze. We trap it inside to appear normal. This dark room technique is the conscious process of finally unfreezing.
And part of this intense technique involves direct confrontation. In the dark, you vividly visualize the specific person who hurt you the most, or sometimes even harder. You visualize the past version of yourself that you are so deeply angry at for being weak, and you tell them every single angry thought you have.
It provides a perfectly safe, contained environment to finally release the emotional poison. We constantly turn our justified anger inward, right? We just swallow the venom whole. And that swallowed poison slowly eats our nervous system alive from the inside out, manifesting as panic. This technique violently externalizes the poison. You are metaphorically and emotionally vomiting it out onto the floor. You scream and hit the pillow until you physically have absolutely nothing left in the tank.
And then, after the purge, the source says you must end the session by consciously cutting the energetic cord. You sit quietly in the dark and you say out loud, I forgive you. Not for you, but to completely free myself.
That is the crucial, necessary closing step of the ritual. You cannot just stay permanently walled up inside the rage. You must fully express the rage so that you can finally reach the other side, which is forgiveness. And true forgiveness in this specific psychological context isn't about saying what you did to me was okay or acceptable.
It's not absolving them of the crime?
No. It is simply saying, I refuse to carry the heavy, toxic burden of hating you around in my body for one more day. I am setting this heavy bag down on the floor, and I'm walking away from it. It is a profound act of ultimate self-liberation.
It's literally clearing out the debris from the dump so that the positive affirmations can finally have clean soil to take root in.
Exactly. Once the emotional dump is completely cleared out, once the decades of poison are finally expelled, then and only then can you successfully plant the new seeds. Then you can confidently look yourself in the mirror and say, I am safe today. And your nervous system might actually have the space to believe you.
This intense process leads us beautifully into the broader philosophy of the source material. Specifically, how we choose to treat ourselves while we are going through this messy, painful rewiring process. Because usually people with panic disorder are their own absolute worst, most vicious critics.
Heartbreaking how hard they are on themselves.
The source introduces the inner child perspective to combat this.
This represents a massive, necessary cognitive reframing of the entire disorder. Usually when we feel the symptoms of a panic attack starting, our immediate reaction is deep hatred.
We hate the feeling, and we hate ourselves.
We hate ourselves for being quote-unquote weak. We furiously think, why the hell is this happening again? Stop it right now. I absolutely hate this. I am so pathetic for not being able to handle the simple trip to the grocery store. We aggressively treat the anxiety like it is an invading enemy combatant that needs to be mercilessly crushed.
Right. We instantly declare total war on our own bodies. We violently beat ourselves up internally for feeling anxious, which, ironically, just dumps more stress hormones into the system and makes us vastly more anxious.
It is a cruel, self-feeding biological loop. But the source suggests a radical shift in perspective. The next time the panic rises, I want you to vividly imagine that the anxiety is actually a terrified, shaking 5-year-old version of yourself frantically pulling on your pant leg for attention.
Wow.
That little child is screaming because, in their mind, they see a real monster in the room. They are genuinely terrified. Now ask yourself honestly, Would you ever violently kick that terrified child away? Would you ever scream right in their face to just shut up and stop being so pathetic?
No. God, of course not. That would be monstrous behavior. Doing that would obviously just completely traumatize them and make them scream 10 times louder. You would instantly get down on one knee, you'd pick them up, and you would hug them tightly. You would calmly say, "I've got you. You're okay. I am right here with you."
And that profound level of deep compassion is exactly how we must learn to treat our own internal panic. The panic is literally just that primitive 5-year-old part of your brain, the amygdala, desperately convinced that it is about to die. If you approach that terrified part of yourself with hostility and anger, you logically confirm to it that there is a severe danger present. You prove to the inner child that the world is indeed a deeply hostile, unsafe place.
But if you approach it differently,
If you approach the sensation with radical self-compassion, if you say internally, "I see you, I know you are so scared right now, but it's okay, we can handle this feeling together," you instantly diffuse the structural tension of the fear.
acceptance creates genuine biological safety. Fighting the feeling just creates more friction and more fire.
Precisely. You essentially have to learn how to consciously parent your own nervous system.
The source also deeply explores what they call the paradox of fear. The tragic idea that, over time, we eventually stop living our lives, not because of the actual 15-minute panic attacks themselves, but entirely because of the overwhelming fear of the fear.
Yes. Severe anticipatory anxiety. The endless loop of what-ifs. What if I decide to go to my best friend's wedding and I have a massive attack during the ceremony? What if I have an attack while I'm trapped on an airplane? What if I collapse during this important work meeting?
So, to avoid the possibility, we begin to systematically shrink our entire world. We stop going out to restaurants, we cancel trips, we slowly build a tiny, restrictive prison for ourselves just to guarantee we stay perfectly safe from the feeling.
And the ultimate solution to that prison isn't discovering some magic pill that guarantees you'll never, ever have a single panic attack again for the rest of your life.
Mm.
Because scientifically, you absolutely cannot guarantee that. Life is stressful. Panic might happen.
No, you can't control the future.
You can't. The true lasting solution is building unshakable internal confidence. It is the deep confidence born of proven competence. It's walking into a room truly knowing, if I happen to have a severe panic attack right now, I already possess the exact tools required to handle it. I know how to aggressively ground myself with the 5 senses. I know how to regulate my heart rate with the 4-4-8 breath. I know how to use the command technique. I will survive it. It will absolutely suck for about 10 minutes, but then it will be completely over and I will be fine.
I genuinely love that approach so much. The ultimate goal isn't miraculously ensuring you never stumble and fall again. It's simply knowing deeply in your bones that if you do fall, you have the exact strength required to get back up on your own.
The second your brain genuinely believes that you can successfully handle the absolute worst-case scenario, the intense, paralyzing fear of that scenario instantly evaporates. You completely remove the sharp teeth from the monster hiding in the closet.
So let's pull all of these massive concepts together as we wrap up. We have covered a truly incredible amount of ground in this session today. We moved from understanding that terrifying physical heart attack sensation all the way down to understanding the stuck memory theory. The profound concept that the panicking brain is literally just replaying an old, dusty trauma tape that got jammed in a broken filing cabinet.
We clearly established that the constant dizziness and the profound exhaustion are simply warning signs of a software system that desperately needs a hard reboot, not proof of an imminent physical death. We thoroughly explored the massive difference between structural hardware and electrical software.
We added some incredibly powerful, practical tools to our daily belts. We have the Acute Emergency Toolkit, grounding forcefully with the 5-4-3-2-1 sensory method to instantly pull our awareness back into the physical room, and utilizing the go-away command to firmly assert our authority over the nervous system when we have the strength.
And crucially, we have the long-term maintenance toolkit to prevent the attacks, the daily 4-4-8 breathing protocol every single morning and every single night to physically strengthen that parasympathetic muscle, and the incredibly deep, difficult work of the dark room technique to aggressively clear out the decades of subconscious toxic debris so we aren't constantly carrying an explosive tank of repressed rage in our bodies.
The source makes one final, really important point about the nature of this recovery that I want to highlight. They clearly state that healing is never a perfectly linear upward line. They openly admit that even after doing all of this intense rewiring work for years, a panic attack might still occasionally knock loudly on their front door during a highly stressful week. But, and this is the true victory here, instead of moving in and utterly ruining their life for 5 straight days, it just lingers awkwardly on the porch for 10 seconds and then it leaves.
That is the ultimate clinical definition of long-term success. Perfect health is not the complete absence of negative human emotion. It is the resilient flexibility of the entire nervous system. You feel the intense emotion, you quickly process the energy, and you smoothly let it go. You don't get trapped in the loop. The massive wave still occasionally hits you, but you fundamentally know how to swim so you don't drown.
And finally, the source material leaves us with one truly provocative, radical thought to chew on. A massive final perspective shift. They boldly suggest that your severe panic attacks are, in reality, a profoundly valuable gift, which I know perfectly well. If you are sitting there listening to this in the middle of a terrible anxiety spike right now, you probably want to violently throw your phone across the room for hearing me say that. It sounds completely insane and insulting, but you have to hear out their logic.
It is a violently necessary wake-up call from your own soul. It is your physical body drastically pulling the emergency brake and screaming, "This specific way you are living your life is no longer working for us." Maybe you are desperately clinging to the wrong career that is slowly crushing your spirit. Maybe you are staying in a deeply toxic, abusive relationship just because you are afraid to be alone. Maybe you're actively burying a horrific childhood trauma that is secretly rotting your foundation. The crippling panic is your body's non-negotiable demand for authentic change. It violently forces you to stop living your entire life completely checked out on autopilot. It brutally forces you to stop and finally heal the wound. It forces you to prioritize your own well-being over everyone else's comfort.
If you finally learn how to listen closely to the quiet whisper of your anxiety, you might never have to suffer through the deafening scream of a full-blown panic attack ever again.
That is absolutely the ultimate takeaway from all of this research. The terrifying physical symptoms are simply the crude language of the body, trying to communicate a vital truth. We have to courageously learn how to fluently speak that language instead of just constantly trying to artificially silence it with fear and medication.
So here is our final deep question for you, the listener, to seriously mull over on your own today. If your severe anxiety actually wasn't a broken disease, but was instead a desperate screaming messenger, what exactly is it trying to tell you right now? What is the painful, difficult truth in your life that you are actively ignoring, that your body is absolutely screaming at you to finally turn around and look at?
It's an incredibly brave, difficult question to ask yourself in the quiet moments, but honestly, finding the truthful answer to that question might be the exact thing that finally sets you free.
Thanks for diving so deep into the dark with us today. Be incredibly kind and patient with your nervous systems this week, everyone.
Keep practicing the breathing, it works.
We'll see you next time.